The guitar you see John Lennon playing here is a Gibson J-160E. And as many Beatles fans know, these guitars are a common sight, and it's well known that the Beatles had 3 of these over their career. But what if I told you that a 4th J-160E existed, and it was right in front of our faces the entire time? And what if I also told you that it was stage used at a real live Beatles concert, making it a genuine, bona fide Beatle guitar? I am so excited about this that despite the fact that I'm a little under the weather today, here is the story. So before I start, I have to thank the Beatles Kid, Adam. Now you guys know I love a good find, and he's the one that first noticed this discovery, at least as far as I know. I'm gonna come back to him in a moment because it's an awesome find, and I really want to make sure that he gets credit for pointing it out. So as you guys can probably imagine, I hear a lot of rumors about Beatle guitar stuff, so I've spent the last 3 days doing my own research on this and scanning photos. I think it's legit, so let's just start with some background here. So the J160E is likely the most used guitar in the Beatles catalog, and although the last 2 albums are sort of up for debate, the J160E can be prominently heard from Please Please Me all the way to the White Album. So first, let's go over the 3 guitars that we do know about, starting with these 2. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to refer to them as J160Es 1 and 2. These first 2 1962 J160Es were purchased by John and George on September 10th, 1962, and these photos show them at Rushworth's Music House in Liverpool, the store where they ordered them from. For a long time, we thought that these photos depicted them actually picking up the guitars, but they were likely taken a few weeks later as a promo for the shop in Mercy Beat, the local music newspaper. And as Andy Babiuk pointed out in Beatles Gear, the guitars already have fingerprint smudges and straps attached, so they kind of look like they've been used. I'm inclined to agree, and I'll tell you why. Just because in this picture, the guy handing over the guitar is Bob Hobbs, the guitar department manager. But that's not good enough for Rushworth's music, so somebody modified the photo to put Mr. Rushworth himself in the frame with a bigger sign to match. But anyhow, it's worth pointing out that these were kind of John and George's first really nice guitars. Remember, these were brand freaking new American guitars, and in today's money, these would have cost like $5 grand each, and they bought 2 of them. Well, at least they put the deposit down. Either way, these 2 guitars got mixed up constantly, literally right out of the store presumably because the one on John's receipt is actually what we consider to be George's guitar, and I'm really not going to go into the full story on that because that's not what this video is about. But the short version is that the guitar fans identify as John's, evident by the heavy picking damage next to the bridge, got stolen sometime in 1963. But in 2014, it was found again and sold for an ungodly amount of money. George's guitar, I think, is still owned by the Harrison estate, but either way, it pops up at exhibits, and the point I'm trying to make is that both of these guitars have been photographed countlessly now in high resolution. In other words, we know what the wood grain and the pickguard patterns look like, and in fact, this is one of the key ways that Lennon's last guitar was finally identified. Moving on though, J160E number 3 was a 1964 model acquired by John in, well, 1964. Now this one is actually really easy to tell apart from the other ones due to a few key differences. First, it has 2 rings around the sound hole instead of 1. However, something a lot of people don't know is that the bridge was actually changed to a molded plastic bridge, which I'd assume is kind of a cost-cutting procedure. The originals would have been rosewood and they were screwed into the top, which is why you see these 2 inlaid plugs here that cover the screw holes. But the updated plastic bridges were actually attached from the backside of the top, meaning that these white dots aren't there on these models. Finally, the last detail I want you to remember is that both of these bridges have a white colored saddle. I think they're ceramic, but that's not really the point, just remember that they're white. This replacement 1964 J160E that I'm referring to as number 3 is also really well known because it's the one that John Lennon had painted with a psychedelic paint job in 1967, and then later stripped down to bare wood and then carved caricatures in it. Now this replacement J160E, we've always sort of assumed that it came from Manny's music in New York City. That's because in these backstage clips from Shea Stadium, you can clearly see a Manny's sticker on the back of the headstock. However, I want you to take a look at this photo. It's from August 14th, 1965, while the Beatles were rehearsing for their final Ed Sullivan Show performance, right before the massive 1965 US tour that would include Shea Stadium. And again, huge thanks to Adam for pointing out this discovery, as well as Marcello for helping dig up some of these photos. From a distance, this just looks like Lennon's second J160E. After all, it has two rings clearly visible around the sound hole. However, take a closer look at the bridge. What you might notice first is that the white colored saddles are missing. In addition, there are two white dots again. What is going on? How can this be possible when Lennon's J160E has a plastic bridge screwed on from the backside with light colored saddles? And also, how is that possible when you can literally go look at this supposed guitar right now and it doesn't have these features on it? To make matters more curious, have a look at this really rare shot. You can just make out on the back of the headstock a Manny sticker. So what the hell is going on here? Okay, I'm going to try to provide some answers. First and foremost, I think this is a different guitar entirely. I'm going to speculate a bit here, but a lot of 1965 model J160Es start to show a specific change. First, the traditional wood bridge has returned, along with those white dots. But you'll notice that the saddle itself is a much darker shade. I've heard these saddles are rosewood, but to me they look more like ebony or some sort of black plastic material. I'll also point out that the guitars from this year seem to have a more busy pickguard, almost with like zebra striping compared to the earlier model's more subtle tortoiseshell design. Now comparing this back to the Lennon photos, it sure appears that this is a 1965 J160E. Adam's theory is that John's 1964 J160E was simply forgotten behind before this US tour, and because they were already in New York filming the show, somebody just headed down to Manny's Music and picked up a loaner. I think Adam's correct, and as it turns out, this loaner guitar would go on the entire 1965 US tour with them during the height of Beatlemania. In this backstage shot from August 17th, 1965 at the Maple Leaf Gardens in Canada, you can spot Harrison playing the same guitar. And because you guys know I love to nerd about this stuff, compare the pickguards. There's really no doubt in my mind. This is also the last time we would see this guitar. This mystery Manny's J160E only pops up during this one 1965 US tour. Before this, during the European tour, the backup J160E was George's, as seen in this photo from Italy. Note the single ring, 8 dots on the bridge, and white ceramic saddle. And after this, in 1966, we can spot Lennon's second J160E as the backup guitar again. Remember, this is the one that's still in the Lennon Museum today. This particular photo is from Germany, and the backstage photos from this tour, we can clearly see him playing this guitar. 2 rings, 6 white dots, white saddle. This is Lennon's known second J160E, no doubt about it. Something I want you to pay attention to though in this photo is the pickguard. What I notice most is that there are 2 prominent white dots here, but more distinctly, we can also see one highlight next to the sound hole, as well as one that lines up almost perfectly with the outer ring. And speaking of that, I know what some of you will ask. Why haven't you compared the pickguards between the Manny's J160E and Lennon's second J160E? Well, you may have noticed that when Lennon had this guitar painted in 1967, the original pickguard was removed. The pickguard on there now is unfortunately a replacement. As a result, there's really only a brief 3-year period where we can dig up photos of this guitar in its original finish, and color shots are almost non-existent. I say almost because I did manage to find a set of color photos that were also taken backstage in Germany 1966, as seen here on this Disc and Music Echo magazine cover. In this alternate angle, which I know appeared in Fabulous 208 magazine, we have an excellent view of the double rings, as well as some empty holes from where John moved the pickup. Notice the 2 spots though, near the ring and the sound hole that I was referring to. In the December 1966 Christmas special issue of the Beatles book, the centerfold spread featured 2 more photos from this day. Huge thanks to Marcello for helping me find this and actually providing a scan. This literally took me like 3 days to locate. It's the best shot of the pickguard that we're gonna get. So let's compare. Here's the Manny's guitar on the left, which we thankfully have perfect shots of, and here's John's guitar from those color photos. Besides the fact that the bridges are obviously different, the pickguards just don't look the same to me. Here's that shot compared to an alternate angle of the Manny's guitar, and I'll even make it black and white if it helps compare. I just don't see those distinctive patterns from John's pickguard. And just for good measure, compare the Manny's guitar on the left to John's guitar from 1964 and 1967. Even though they're dark and low quality, you can spot the features that I'm referring to on both. So, unless John's guitar spontaneously changed its bridge and pickguard for a month or so in 1965, I'd say this is a completely different guitar. And I promise, so here it is. All throughout the 1965 tour, you can spot this loaner J160E behind the band, and as I've mentioned before on my channel, the Beatles sometimes did multiple shows in a day. They played the Cow Palace outside San Francisco on August 31st, 1965, the last stop of the tour. During the afternoon show, though, Lennon actually switches to the J160E at one point. You'd think it would be for I Feel Fine, but I actually don't think that's the case. In the footage that we do have, he sure appears to play his normal Rickenbacker 325 for the majority of the performance. However, if you look closely here, you'll notice that he's sort of fiddling with his strap earlier in the show. Maybe that's a clue, I don't know. And after watching all the newsreel footage that I could find, I noticed something else. This concert was particularly rowdy, and some even call it the most dangerous Beatles concert.
What's the matter with you?
Oh, I didn't want it to be over.
Well, don't you have some records at home you can go home and play?
Yes, but it isn't the same.
Put on a record and look at the pictures.
Okay, I'll try.
More than once, fans rushed the stage. It's possible that Lennon's Rickenbacker or the strap was damaged at one point. Because check out this clip here. You can see a fan rushing the stage, and then security drags them away. But if you freeze frame here, you can also see that someone appears to be carrying Lennon's Rickenbacker off the stage. And in this crazy photo, you can actually spot Mal Evans pulling a fan off Paul with the Manny's J160E in the background and John Lennon still holding his 325 on the left. What I can say, though, is that it appears he used it for the last song, I'm Down. I have no idea why, though. Maybe he just didn't feel like playing organ at that particular moment. As most fans know, though, I'm Down was the last song of the show, and in this really rare newsreel footage, we can actually see Lennon exiting the stage with this guitar in hand. So if I were to guess, I'd assume he played it for the last song of the show. What this does mean, though, is that a fourth Beatles J160E might be out there. And once again, huge thanks to Adam for his keen eye. I'll put the links to his channel down in the description. Thanks for watching, see you next time.